I've been spending some time with the teaching by Bhikku Bodhi for the SAFE courses, and he's a very, it's a talk I've listened to before in the Four Noble Truths, but he's a very powerful teacher. And there's one little part of it I thought I'd share from this, because it's so much what we experience as Dharma practitioners that we're always swimming upstream. And so he's talking about really how we need to how the Buddha is asking us to understand our experience, to look at the truth of our experience. And it actually has to go against the usual way that we look at things. So the point of the Buddha in doing this is not to really bum us out or anything, because the first thing he taught about was dukkha, or the unsatisfactory nature of existence. But actually, he wasn't really trying to bum us out, but he also wasn't trying to console us unrealistically. Basically, the Buddha's aim was for us to become awakened, to become free of all suffering, to see what really is. So in order to see what really is, what he's saying is we have to unlearn. And I think that's very much the case. We've been talking about our retreat experiences lately, and that's a lot of what you're doing there, is seeing habits of mind that you need to unlearn. And with this particular little section of this teaching is asking us to take a much bigger view than just looking at our afflictions or anything like that. So yes, this unlearning does involve the kinds of screens that we put up, our preconceptions and things like that. And it does require us to sit down and really take a close look at things to get rid of those preconceptions. But he's asking us in this talk, in this section, to take a much broader view of our whole existence. And so in that way, the Buddha asked us to look at three things, three aspects. And these are like enjoyment or satisfaction, danger or unsatisfactoriness, and release or freedom. And so that's the part of this I wanted to share, because I think that very much, it really taps into our day-to-day experience as well as our the larger picture of what our life and our lives are like and what our potential is. So the Buddha points out that life involves pleasure and enjoyment, and there's no problem with that actually. But he also points out that if we didn't have this enjoyment, and now you have to realize we're talking from the Pali Canon perspective here, is very much the determination to be free and renunciation. But I always find this helpful to think this way very strongly, is that if we didn't have all this enjoyment in our belongings and the people we know and the things we do, our achievements and all of that, then we wouldn't become attached. So yeah, that's because there's enjoyment in the world, that's why we become attached, duh. So that's not saying that these enjoyments are wholesome or unwholesome. We have a mixture of both, but they do. Some of these things are very wholesome and can be very rewarding and satisfying. And you have to say, even our Dharma practice is something that we have desire for. And desire isn't always negative. So that's something I think is often mistaken in what people think about Buddhism. So it's not having joy that's the problem, or having, pleasure isn't the problem. It's the attachment side of it. So then he gets into the next part, which is the danger, and that's that these things are inadequate. They are unsatisfactory. And why is that? What's the problem with all these, when we don't look closely, all these different pleasures and joys that we have? It's because they're impermanent, and so they don't last. So that's the bummer. Everything's subject to change. And so even at some deep level, many of our experiences, even that are pleasurable, are associated with pain, which is, not very hard to see, especially when you think of people who are taking substances. Brief amount of joy or, euphoria, and then you have to repeat it, and, it just doesn't lead to much happiness, that kind of thing. So then this third, so that's a big, that's a lot of work for us to look at our lives in that way and really come to grips with our experience for the things that we love to do, even the love of life, all of these things we can hold on to. So isn't that the joy or enjoyment is the problem, it's the clinging and craving that goes on with it. So then this third aspect is freedom. And this is, talking from the Pali Canon perspective here, they really focus a lot on the craving. And so more to get to a place of, I would say, with a kind of a disenchantment and less a certain kind of passion about these things that aren't going to be really always being able to give you a long-term happiness. And that's the basic point here, is that you might think the Buddha put a lot of stress on the negative side by talking first about dukkha and unsatisfactoriness, but really what Bhikku Bodhi says here is that really his thought was that his thought really starts not with dissatisfaction or dukkha, but something that's more fundamental under that, which is what we always say, that people want happiness. That's where the Buddha was coming from. He saw people want to be happy. And that's our basic fundamental drive and urge. And so then the thing is, well, let's look into that. How can we do that? And then he has to just point out to us, wake up. These things that you're spending all your time with, putting all your energy with, aren't leading you to happiness. So that's what we have to really come to recognize. And that gives us the chance to have enjoyment without craving. Right? That's what we're kind of, and that takes us to the place of this kind of freedom and this release. So this is just some thoughts that he shared, trying to help us see that true happiness needs to be immune from dukkha, and that is possible. Most of what we experience, well, actually probably everything we've ever experienced, is associated in one way, shape, or form with dissatisfaction, because it's all transitory and ends. That's all we know. But what the Buddha is saying is that this basic drive, there is a solution to this. So, yay, Bhikku Bodhi.